Every saga has a beginning. And so does this new miniseries, where I'm going to go through all 9 episodes of the Star Wars saga and review each one. Obviously, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Kind of a given. I've watched this movie so many times. But before each review, I'm going to rewatch each movie. So that included this one. So I just finished about an hour ago rewatching Phantom Menace. And it's been a while since I've seen it. And this disc is pretty cool. I got this one years ago. Let's have a look at it, shall we? It's got the face of Darth Maul as the disc. It's pretty sweet. And I think George Lucas added some scenes to the DVD version. There's like an extension to the pod race scene. And then there's a couple other scenes, like a scene between Padme and Anakin shortly after they get to Coruscant. Let me pop it closed. There we go. But it's really cool looking. I have all 3 versions, like this, episode 2, and episode 3. The one thing I am glad that they went back and changed is Yoda, because this version has the puppet Yoda. And even though Puppet Yoda looked really good in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, Puppet Yoda in like episode 1, he doesn't look so good. No, he doesn't. So I think the CGI version of Yoda looks a lot better. He does. All right, so as usual, we're going to just ramble a little bit, talk about each episode, each movie, start to finish. We'll do it in order. And eventually we'll get to episode 9. And my plan is hopefully episode 9 will be on Disney Plus so I can endure it whenever it is available on Disney Plus, so I don't have to rent it on Redbox. That is my plan, because I really have no intention of buying it. I have the first 7 episodes, obviously. Episode 8 I watched, but I did not buy it. But we're talking about episode 1, so let's focus solely on episode 1, and then that's how we're going to do each episode. So it had been many years since we got a Star Wars movie for a lot of the old school Star Wars fans. I was a kid in the 90s, and I'd already watched the original trilogy so many times. And I have been a fan of Star Wars. I had played several of the Star Wars PC video games, like TIE Fighter, Dark Forces, including Pod Racer, which came out, I think, following Phantom Menace. I think that was on the N64. That was awesome. The Rogue Squadron games. So, huge Star Wars fan. I think it's kind of a given. And when it was announced that George Lucas had decided to start work on the long-awaited prequel series, everybody was excited. And then in 1999, we got episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And of course, I went to go see it in theaters. I was excited. And admittedly, I bought a few action figures back in 1999, leading up to the release of episode 1. And yes, I still have them. You know why I bought them? I bought them because I had a feeling, a hope, yeah, that's right, a new hope, a few bits of hope, that maybe years later, if they were still in mint condition, I'd be able to sell them for some money. I don't know if I really could sell them yet for money. I don't know. I mean, some of them might fetch a few bucks. But, see, everyone else, I think, back then had the same idea as me. And we see how well that idea turned out. So I have, like, a box full of, like, episode 1 action figures. And I think I have a couple episode 2 action figures. Not as many as episode 1, but anyways. I also have some of the posters. The posters were really sweet looking. I think I have this poster. I have the poster of Anakin. And his shadow is Darth Vader. It's so cool looking. But we're going to give you my general thoughts about episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And I think it's safe to say by now that most of you have watched episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So, spoilers. So I think that's going to be how it's going to be for all these episodes, spoilers in advance. I'll just say it, let you know. There will be spoilers. Initially, is this as good as the original trilogy? No, it's not. It's better than the sequel trilogy, so I'll say that much. And I'll give you my ranking for each of these films, how all 9 of them rank, from first to worst, at the end of each review. So we'll have that's going to be an ongoing thing to see exactly where each episode ranks for me. And I'm curious about where episode 1 ranks for you. Whether you love it, you hate it, or you thought it was just okay. Feel free and let me know below in the comment section. So yes, this is set in the past, a galaxy far, far away, during the final years of the Galactic Republic. And there's a little trade dispute that's happening, right, with the Trade Federation. They got a blockade of Naboo, and Chancellor Valorum has dispatched 2 Jedi secretly to negotiate with the Trade Federation led by Newt Gunray. But little do they realize that there's a Phantom Menace behind Newt Gunray and the Trade Federation and the blockade of Naboo, Darth Sidious, this mysterious cloaked figure. And Darth Sidious's apprentice, Darth Maul. And other characters that are introduced, the 2 Jedi, of course, Qui-Gon Jinn and a young Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's right, Obi-Wan Kenobi, played by Ewan McGregor, and Qui-Gon Jinn, played by the great Liam Neeson. So we had a few other characters as well that they encounter along the way. We have Queen Amidala, a.k.a. Padme. And then we have Senator Palpatine, the senator of Naboo, as well as a Gungan named Jar Jar Binks, a droid named R2-D2, a protocol droid named C-3PO, a young boy from Tatooine named Anakin Skywalker, along with his mom Shmi, and Watto, a Toydarian, as well as a few Jedi we encounter, Yoda, Puppet Yoda from my version of the movie, as well as Mace Windu, played by the legendary badass himself, Samuel L. Jackson, and, the rest of the Jedi Council. But anyways, see, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was written and directed by George Lucas, with a brilliant score by one of the greatest composers in cinema, John Williams. Did a great job with the score of Episode 1. One of my favorites is, of course, Duel of Fates. Fantastic song. And it's very action-packed. You got all sorts of things going on. You got space, ground battle. You got some epic lightsabering going on between Obi-Wan as well as Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul at the climax of the movie. And did I mention the music was awesome? Yeah, it's kind of awesome. So George Lucas is obviously a visionary and a great director in my opinion. However, I don't think he's ever been the best at, say, writing dialogue. Like, character dialogue has always been kind of his weak point. Well, one of them. Sometimes some of the plots can be, there's been way worse plots in recent films. Phantom Menace is a masterpiece compared to a lot of movies today. But, we all have our weak points, and Lucas's, I think, was the fact that, unlike the original trilogy, where he had some help along the way, including his wife at the time, I feel like Lucas should have had some people on his writing staff that actually were good at writing dialogue. He should have looked for a writer that was also a Star Wars fan that could do a little bit better job, getting the script a little bit more fleshed out. Because for the most part, Phantom Menace is good. It's better than the next film we'll review in the Star Wars saga, but there are even a few scenes in Episode 1 that could have been tweaked a little bit, but overall, it is Star Wars. That's what you expect, but it's still parsecs better than the sequel trilogy, more or less. The CGI fest. So even today, there is parts CGI wise that still hold up pretty good, similar to Jurassic Park from the 90s. There's other parts that not so much. But back in the day, it was top-notch CGI for Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And it was great. It looked awesome. The ships, the droids, even Watto, as well as Jar Jar, even though people were annoyed by Jar Jar at the time. I think people like Jar Jar a little bit more these days compared to certain sequel trilogy characters. We're going to focus back on the prequels, sorry. getting off topic. But yeah, it had a great cast, as I've mentioned a few already, like Liam Neeson, along with Ewan McGregor. Ian McDermott was great as Senator Palpatine. We got lovely Natalie Portman, as well as Samuel L. Jackson, badass as always. And Frank Oz coming back as Yoda. But like I said, it's one of those rare circumstances where the CGI version of Yoda, a couple years later when they went back to redo it, is a lot more Yoda looking than the puppet that we ended up with in episode 1 at the beginning. And I think that Frank Oz was also doing the puppet work, because not only is he a voice guy for puppets, he also was a puppeteer, because he was involved with Jim Henson, I think, as well as the Muppets. He played Miss Piggy. I think he was also involved with Sesame Street. So, yeah, Frank Oz, legendary voice, and he's a puppeteer, but he also is best known for voicing Miss Piggy as well as Yoda. Little side note right there. But we also had some other alums from the original trilogy, including Anthony Daniels reprising the voice of C-3PO. I don't know if he actually played C-3PO, because I think C-3PO in this one was CGI'd, because it was just C-3PO without the outer metal. It was just like really early C-3PO that was rebuilt by Anakin. And of course, Kenny Baker, the late Kenny Baker, who was the driver of R2-D2. Yes, they had to actually have somebody inside R2-D2 when R2-D2 was moving around, and that was Kenny Baker. And unfortunately, I think he passed away a few years ago. And they even brought in Terrence Stamp, another great actor, to play Chancellor Valorum. He was only in episode 1, but he did a good job for the few scenes he was in. He's a great actor, by the way. A few other actors that were in the episode was Jake Lloyd. And for the most part, I thought by the end of episode 1, I liked Jake Lloyd as young Anakin. And at the beginning, there's some cringe scenes, but he starts to grow on you. And by the end, he is, I think, pretty likable by the end of episode 1. And, credit to Jake Lloyd. He did a good job for the material he was given, and the fact that he was a child actor at the time. It is sad that he was bullied, and I guess by other kids growing up, and it caused some issues with him in real life. I hope things are better for him now, but unfortunately, sometimes that's the price of fame. But, he'll always be remembered as young Anakin Skywalker in episode 1. And overall, I thought he did a good job. Also, another actor that was, I would say, negatively affected by his role in the original prequels was Ahmad Best. He did Jar Jar. I think he did both the CGI version, like he was the one in place before they put the CGI in, and he also obviously did the voice of Jar Jar. He even did the voice of Jar Jar in some of the Clone Wars episodes. But because of how negatively Jar Jar was received, unfortunately that left a kind of a negative impact on at first with Ahmad Best, and he's had a comeback. I think he's a host on a Disney Plus show now, but there was a time when he was driven to suicidal thoughts over that hate. And it is unfortunate, because apparently Lucas had plans for Jar Jar that he had to tweak because of the negative fan backlash. And there's a few other controversial things that came out regarding certain characters, like the Gungans, like Newt Gunray's species, and one or two others from episode 1. But at the same time, another character that you may not know of, another actress that was in episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was the lovely Keira Knightley. I'm sure some of you are like, what? Keira Knightley was in episode 1? Yeah. I didn't know it either, because she looks a lot like Natalie Portman. Well, she did when she was younger. She's a few years younger than Natalie Portman. But at the time, I thought Natalie Portman was playing both roles at the same time, because you had Queen Amidala, which was Padme. Then you had her loyal bodyguard, and they would constantly be switching roles throughout episode 1. And when you go back and rewatch it a few times, you catch on. But the very first time I watched it, in fact, I have to admit, I honestly thought it was Natalie Portman, like playing both roles, but it's not. There are scenes when she's playing Queen Amidala, and there are scenes when Keira Knightley, her decoy, her bodyguard, is playing Queen Amidala, while Natalie Portman is playing, Padme. So Padme is Queen Amidala, but, she does have the decoy to protect her during tense situations. And when you go back, it seems a lot more obvious now. But there was a time when I honestly thought that they just had Natalie Portman playing both roles and they just CGI'd it in real cleverly and they just edited it in together. But yeah, Keira Knightley, a younger Keira Knightley, was in episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I know some of you may have not known that, but now you know. Okay, so it's not, like I said, it's not the same level as the original trilogy. But episode 1 did set the foundation for the prequel era, along with the Clone Wars TV series. And another great performance I have to give credit to is Ray Park as Maul. Now, he didn't voice Maul, but he played the physical version of Maul in episode 1. And all the fight scenes, the fight scenes with Qui-Gon as well as Obi-Wan Kenobi, that was all Ray Park's doing. And there's some really great lightsaber dueling going on in episode 1. So overall, it was a CGI fest, and some of it's hold up, some of it not so much. And it was obviously different than what people had come to expect from the original trilogy because it's set in the past, in the final years of the Old Republic, before the rise of the Empire. And even though this is nowhere near the same level as the original trilogy, at the same time, I give credit to George Lucas for his vision, for his directorial skills and prowess. And it did set the stage for the prequel era. And unlike the sequel era, it has a start, a middle, and a finish. And by the time you get to the end of the prequel era, it ties in together rather nicely. It's coherent. It's connected. Very similar to the original trilogy, from episode 4 to episode 6. So overall, yes, Star Wars episode 1, The Phantom Menace, I recall watching it a few times in theaters, and I enjoyed going and watching it. I forgot how many times, maybe like 2 or 3 times I went to go watch it. And I loved it every single time I went to go see it. And whenever you go and see a movie a few times, you like it. And of course, I obviously ended up getting it on DVD. But I wish I had the version with CGI Yoda instead of puppet Yoda, because CGI Yoda is a little bit better. So where do I rank Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, with all 9 movies? By the way, I'm not going to tell you the other 9 movies until we do each one, so that's something you're going to just have to wait for. So, where I would rank Phantom Menace, I would put it 5th place. Smack somewhere in the middle ground. Somewhere right there. So, 5th place on my list of the Star Wars saga films, from first to worst, I'll put it right there in 5th place. That's where I'm putting The Phantom Menace. And I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy going back and rewatching it. So it was great. And the pod racing scene's still epic. It's great. And I love how they give you time. Like today, it would probably be edited the hell down. And I think that would have been a mistake. Because sometimes you can be like Peter Jackson and you can put too much in a movie. But sometimes you have to let something breathe. And like George Lucas having the pod race from start to finish, all 3 circuits, even adding a few extra stuff on the DVD version, was good. Because it definitely really drew you into the race itself. Not just as a viewer, but as even a spectator. Maybe you're one of them sitting there on Bunta Eve watching the race between Anakin as well as Sebulba and Odie Mandrell. I was all about Odie Mandrell on the Pod Racer video game. I hear that's actually coming to Switch, and I think it's coming to PlayStation 4. I have to pick that up. I'm sure it doesn't look as good as I remember, but I still enjoyed playing Pod Racer from back in the day. But yeah, I definitely loved Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. It's obviously not my favorite, but it's better than what we ended up getting from Disney. Thank you, Disney. Very cool. So there you go. That's my review of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And it's definitely held up. Some CGI, not so much. It was good they went back and redid Yoda. Definitely. If you don't believe me, go look at comparisons on YouTube. But I want to know what you think about Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Did you love it? Did you hate it? And where would you rank it on your list of the Star Wars saga? At the top, at the bottom, in the middle? And of course, next time, join me as we sit back once again to review Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. That's not a very good title, but in all honesty, it's still a better title than Rise of Skywalker.